Thanks for having me here today. I really appreciate it. So we're going to take a little bit of a run through the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is an interesting concept because it's not a thing. It's not even a limited set of things. When we talk about security in IoT, we're talking about a lot of T's. And I'm going to talk through some of the different verticals and why, as we think about the security models, some things are going to go across all of the models, all the different verticals. And we had Andrew just brought up that you have to understand the devices, you have to understand the network. But there are some things that are going to change thing to thing, so I'll get into that a little bit. But first, let's take a quick peek at what could happen when things go wild. So we've got a fellow here, he's stuck in traffic, he's on his way to work. And he's thinking, what did I forget to do back at the house? Maybe I left the refrigerator door open, he thinks. So he gets his smartphone out. He takes a look at it and goes to his home automation system. Anybody here have a home automation system? You control the heat, turn your lights on, right? This is the promise. We're going to be able to, before you even get home, you open the garage door, turn on your lights, get the oven started so that your food will be warm when you get home. Right? This is where we're going with home automation, but what could that also mean? It could go awry. Somebody could actually attack it. Anybody heard what happened with some of the baby monitors in the United States? Yeah? No? Okay, so baby monitors, these are now IoT. They're internet connected. And it's great because you could be halfway across the world, away from your children, yet you could check in on them. You could be downstairs, or you could be halfway across the world. You're going to be able to check in on your kids, hear them, see what they're doing. Well, yeah, surprisingly, with the baby monitor, a couple of baby monitors in the US, attackers were able to get through. There was a nanny who was scared to death because she started hearing things like, oh, that baby's so beautiful. I love that baby. Go to sleep, baby. Yeah, so attackers getting in from the outside. So home automation. But if we can open up our homes to our being able to remotely access them and control them, if we're not careful, so can attackers. All right, so we got this guy, he's coming on home. He checks his home automation, and he goes, you know what? I was being silly. The garage door was down, the refrigerator was closed, it's all good, nothing to worry about. But there really was. So in this case, we got an angry refrigerator. So someone had actually hacked into his home automation system, made his refrigerator very angry, and it was spilling out ice cubes. Could be annoying, but it's not going to be terrible when he gets back. Dishwasher was overflowing. It had gotten turned on, and it wasn't supposed to be on, and it was now overflowing. Could be a little bit worse, right? Depending on your house and the configuration, we could be talking some flood damage. But this is where the real issue would come in this home automation scenario. The attacker also turned on the toaster, and the toaster overheated, and the toaster was near a curtain. So what would happen then? Fire. And depending on what if the smoke alarm was connected to the IoT too, and somebody had hacked the smoke alarm. It was in the home automation system. They'd already hacked everything. Right? Smoke alarm might not even go off. This is one example. This is a home consumer example. And it's a little bit lighthearted, on purpose. We use something, instead of being really scary, it's a little cartoony. But it really points out something that's much bigger and more important about IoT, which is that the stakes have gone up significantly. We used to worry about if somebody was stealing a credit card. What can you do with my credit card? The worst thing you can do is charge what my limit is. It's not a lot. And what's my credit card company going to say? I'm liable for $50. Well, in IoT, we now have actually connected and software-enabled and internet-enabled critical infrastructure. Cars, healthcare devices, onboard wearable healthcare devices. And it's here. We're not going to stop it. I'm not saying that we should stop it. We got some numbers here about, the number of things, and you can find resources all over the place to tell us how much it's going to explode. The reality is we don't know how much it's going to explode. If you looked at cloud adoption and you looked at the history of cloud adoption in the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of the numbers got it pretty off. They were actually much lower than adoption occurred. But still, we knew it was coming. We knew it was going to grow. It was going to expand. And it's the same thing with the Internet of Things. Will it be 30 billion by 2020? Maybe. Maybe it's going to be 40 billion. Maybe it's going to be 25 billion. It's going to be a lot. And that's really what is most important. And these are going to be driving our lives and managing our lives. So how do we secure it? How do we step back and think about, the whole big picture? We can look at some areas, like can I execute securely? Absolutely critical. What's the authentication to that device? Absolutely critical. We need to understand all of that, but what we really need to look at is to the whole picture and take a look at how these different components fit together and where we put and layer in the security. We need to understand the threat models for each of these layers. This is the model that IBM has put together. Now on the bottom layer, the very beginning layer, I'm standing in front of it, the very beginning layer, this is our controlling device. That's a smartphone. Do we know how to secure smartphones? Pretty good at it, right? I mean, we've been doing this quite a lot. Then we get into the cloud. Are we good at securing the cloud? We're getting better, right? We're getting better at it. But we certainly understand it. It's nothing really that new. Then we get out into the internet. Then we get into some areas where we've got some very critical things to look at, like the local area networks. How many networks do you think the average connected car has in it right now? Anybody want to take a guess? Number of networks in the average connected car? No one? 3. How many lines of code in the average luxury car? Millions, more than Windows. Lines of code. Software. All right, so the network, what do we have to do with the network? If we have multiple networks in a car, what are we looking at? We're probably looking at a less protected and more protected, less sensitive, more sensitive zone. Remember that slide, I think it was the last speaker, that said convergence of IT and OT? Was that you, Andrew? Okay. Convergence of IT and OT in critical infrastructure, like in nuclear power plants. Guess where else IT and OT are converging? Your car. Literally, it's true. It's happening in your car. It's happening in your house. The operations network, the part that has to be very reliable, may not get a lot of patching, that is connected now to the data side. Did anybody see what happened with the United Airlines flight in how the FBI responded by arresting an alleged hacker of a United Airlines flight? This was last week or the week before. You did. Right? What'd he do? He got from the IT Wi-Fi to the OT, right? Yeah. So those networks are going to be really, really important. So can we just take on our car? Can we just take, you got IPS, you got firewalls, right? Let's go, fire up our car. We'll put in IPS. We'll put firewalls. We'll be able to separate these zones, get access control in our car, in our house. Not quite, right? So we have some absolute work to do there. Then we get into the actual things. Google will tell you Lollipop is going to run the Internet of Things, but that's not really entirely the case, at least yet. What do a lot of things run on? Proprietary platforms. If you've got agent-based security, you got security that you install on something, what does it need to understand? The platform. How about if you're doing application security testing? We've got millions of lines of code in the car. We've got software running our pacemakers. I really hope somebody's doing application security testing, don't you? It'd be It would make me feel better if the brakes that are running my car have application. The code running the nuclear submarines has been tested. If you're testing software, if you're testing code, does it matter the hardware and the operating system that that code is going to run on? Yes. Yes, it does. You need to understand where that code's going to run in order to be able to test it well. So again, what if we've got embedded proprietary systems? What are we going to need? Different ways, different solutions to even test our code. And we're going to need authentication and monitoring. Another thing to take a look at with the things is something else that's going to change quite a bit, which is the order of magnitude of data that we're going to be able to track. Has anybody here heard of a SIM, Security Event Information Management? SIM solution, you use these in the SOC. You work at Intel, right? Yeah. Okay, so these security event information management, if you work in a security SOC, this is probably what you look at all day. And we talk about events per second. Well, just imagine what we can start tracking when we've got all the different kinds of things feeding into our monitoring and management system. It's going to go through the roof. We thought big data was big. Just wait until we get the T-logs, the transaction logs, from all of our different things. It's going to be huge. And we're going to have to be able to parse it for security purposes, but we also are going to have another challenge, which is the inverse, which is how do we protect all that data for privacy reasons? I was talking to a CISO a couple of weeks ago at an energy plant. And he said, you know, we are really amping up the security and controls on the usage, electricity usage. I said, really? Why? And he said, well, because it's personal information. I said, oh? I said, well, think about the things that you could find out about somebody just based on what their energy usage is. If they're home or not, you could potentially find out when they go away on vacation. You might even know their religion, depending on the use of their electricity. So I said, okay, yeah, I get it. That's very private data. Things are leaking out or capturing data on us all the time. Where we go, what we do. So we've got a privacy concern too. Looking specifically at the home automation systems, looking at the security enhancements that we can get from them, but also this gets now into some of the verticals and the layers where we look at the specific technologies so that we can understand what it is that we have to protect and also the potential threat models. So in a home automation system, if you turn the lights on and off, is that a security risk? Potentially, if you're trying to break into the house. Garage doors, yes, somebody could open it up, or they could close it while you were driving in, hurt your car. Televisions, what security could that be related to? Anybody remember Samsung in the news a few months ago? Samsung's privacy policy, because they have voice-activated television, Samsung's privacy policies was, be aware that your private conversations are being recorded and sent to a third party. That was right in their terms of service, which is great because they were being really open about it. But what about voice-controlled systems? They're picking up our voices. So they're picking up our voices. That means they can pick up our conversations. So looking at the different kinds of technologies, thinking about the attacks against them, the networks themselves, right? When we've got a home system, we're kind of at the mercy of how the home user is going to be connecting. They may not lock down their network as well as possible. And then where you get these actual solutions from. In the connected car space, we have another set of things to look at. The emergency assistance or roadside assistance, if somebody can access it or not. The telemetry, so information about the car, speed. Eventually, I have the feeling that we're all going to get speeding tickets just automatically. We'll just go into our car, we'll finish driving, and On your phone, you'll get a little like speeding ticket at the end of it. Oh, you're going over if you're a speeder. Being able to start it remotely. Here we get into the 3 different networks. So we've got in the car, we've got the controller area network and the electrical control units. And the ECUs are the ones that connect to your brakes and to the engine and to the power of the windows, the power windows. And what are we doing as we're crossing some of these networks? Why on earth would you want the ECU to be talking to, say, your stereo? You might say, I don't really want that to be connected. Well, if looking at the environment and the use of these systems, some car manufacturers are realizing that they can make it better for the user if you are going at a very high speed and the window is down, turn the radio up. If you start slowing down, put the window up, turn the radio down automatically. It sounds really cool. See, this is the kind of thing that when we build out new systems, there's somebody who's not a security person, who doesn't think about freaky things all the time like security people do, who says, you know, it would be really cool if the radio would adjust based on how much noise was in the cabin. Yeah, that's really great, but guess what? You're crossing across those 2 networks. We can think about these things in advance. We can build security in. But we need to do the threat modeling, and we need to do it at each one of those layers I was talking about. The other thing with automobiles is connecting in with identity and access management. So that car basically checking in. We heard about industrial control already. So SCADA, you know, what we're doing in critical infrastructure, the HVAC systems, all the energy plants, nuclear power plants, fossil fuel, the rigs even, you know, these are all getting connected. What's interesting in the SCADA world or industrial control is that, as we were hearing before about OT, they're, you know, kind of older, proprietary, not often patched. What's happened more and more in IoT? These systems that have been completely locked down have been much more opened up. We have remote access, but now we have remote access not from a limited number of systems, which is sort of what we were seeing years ago. We're seeing remote access from smartphones into these really critical systems. And guess what? They're not super well protected. And we don't always have a lot of intelligence about who should or shouldn't be in those systems because we're not monitoring them as carefully as we should. Does anybody remember when the United States our water system was hacked by Russia? Remember that? No? Okay. It turned out that a pipe rusted in a U.S. municipal water supply. And a couple weeks before that, the person who'd set up the management system had enabled remote access because he was going on vacation to visit his in-laws. Guess where his in-laws worked or lived? Russia, yes. So when that pipe failed, since the monitoring wasn't contextualized and saying, you know, I understand the HR rules, I understand usage, and I know where this particular admin is going, he's going to Russia, that's okay. In the SIM, in your reporting, enhance it and enrich that data so that you can make a much more context-based decision. Instead, we got a whole bunch of headlines saying that we've been hacked by Russia. It was a rusty water pipe. So opening up these systems, they are called critical infrastructure for a reason, and really not having great context in terms of what we're looking at and monitoring. So we can really improve that quite a bit. And then the last special vertical area, and there are a lot more vertical areas in IoT, but I just wanted to cover a couple and to give you some views into the specific differences of the threat models. So again, as you're making that V and you're looking at all the layers, here are some of the differences in the verticals. This one where we've got smart meters, 2 big things here. One is they're connected to grids, they're creating microgrids. The other thing I think that's really interesting about smart meters, so potentially bringing the power grid down, turning lights off. The other thing where I think this is going to be really interesting going forward is What happens when if you sell your energy back? Anybody have solar panels or wind? Anybody sell energies back to their power company? I do. So when I'm selling the energy back to my power company, and I get, it's an even trade. I give them a kilowatt hour of energy, they give me a kilowatt hour of credit. So what would happen if I could start spinning that well above and beyond what I was actually generating? Money. Yeah, so I think we're going to see some interesting stuff go on here, because criminals are going to, of course, know that and figure that out and maybe potentially try and generate money off of hacked smart meters, in addition to causing mayhem, I think, potentially with the grid itself. So these are connected to the grids and the microgrids, and we're also sending that information, the telemetry, about how the energy is being used, which again could run into some privacy or data issues. And we see these at the electric utilities and the power grid. Oh, I forgot one. Okay, the medical devices. This is a really, really important one, because if you get close enough to a user of the medical device and you turn it off, it is potentially actually loss of life, right? So if I turned off your pacemaker, I could kill you. We had a former IBM researcher, Jay Radcliffe, who wears an insulin pump. One day he got really curious and he said, gee, I wonder how you talk to this insulin pump. Well, it turned out it was a PHP script. No authentication. Anybody near him and his pump could have turned insulin on or off, effectively killing him. We also have a really interesting area just in the medical devices overall, because they can be very hard to patch, because what happens usually when you get a medical device proved as a medical device, it's at a certain level of the code. So what happens if you patch it? It's not approved anymore. So that's definitely a challenge there. With the connectivity, we are looking at the RF, so there's a potential to jam the connection. But we're also looking at, there's pressure right now to widen the scope. And also where we get it from, the medical device manufacturers. So that was some of the vertical areas on each one of these. I've got some specific attacks at each of the layers, and if you notice, these attacks get repeated. It's not because we got lazy and we just said, oh, I'm getting confused about what attacks are where. It's because we went through and we said at each of these layers, there are some areas that are going to be more or less likely. So password attacks, you see them on almost any layer where you would use password. Web app vulnerabilities, you might be surprised that they show up at a lot of those different layers of our model. But when we were looking at it, we realized that web apps are going to come into play in a lot of these. So if I have a smart meter as a thing, what's it probably talking to? Back end, probably talking to a web app. So as you're doing the threat modeling per vertical and per layer in the IoT, you're also going to find that some of these issues are going to come up again and again and again. Some of the additional attacks, things like going to the building automation system, turning the lights on and off. This one, very interesting. This is actually a CD player, a CD, that had some malcode on it, and when it was put into the car to play, it was actually able to access the ECUs in the vehicle. So access that controlled operations side, things like brakes. So this is real. These are some real attacks that we've actually seen in IoT. I'm not trying to scare anybody, just trying to make sure that we understand that as we're doing the threat models, we do think about all the different areas. Shodan, you've already heard about. Sometimes we call it basically Google hacking for IoT, but you already heard about what this is. It's a way to find, discover IoT devices and get a handle for whether those devices, if they're vulnerable or not. We've got a bunch of threat surfaces. You need to think about each one of them separately. Please think about all of the layers and also think about the threat models for each of the vertical types, because getting up close to somebody to turn their pacemaker off is definitely a different risk consideration than remotely hacking somebody's car. We recommend that you take a look at some of these things. The first one is the Application Security Project for the IoT Top 10. So it's OWASP for IoT. Do your own pen testing. Do that threat modeling. Make sure that you build security in as you're looking at the systems, whether you're a manufacturer or you're going to be an adopter. You can ask the manufacturer if they did build security in. And we actually have some specific industry guidance. We've written an IBM automotive point of view for security. Monitor everything in the IoT. It's going to be really important. That's the only way we're going to find out if there's anomalous activity, if people if somebody did turn on that refrigerator or started spewing ice cubes, somebody goes and turns off somebody's pacemaker. It's going to be, monitoring is going to be absolutely critical. We're probably going to need to get new monitoring solutions, or at least be able to parse these different protocols, but I think also we're going to have to look at changing them a little bit for the size of scale. All right, thank you very much. I was really honored to be here today. I hope that gave you some food for thought about IoT, and thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Kelly.